Hello, my name is Ellen Tarlow, and I'm the author of Looking for Smile.
Hi there. My name's Lauren Stringer, and I am the illustrator of Looking for Smile.
We're going to share with you a little bit about the process that went into the making of our picture book. But before we get started, we'd like to thank.
Jenny Williams and Stephanie Eddy of Dawson Education Co-op, as well as the Arkansas Department of Education and Division of Child Care.
We'd also like to thank Amy Vandement and Isabel Baker of the Bookvine for Children for making all of this possible.
And since the picture book always begins with text or words, before the pictures are made, we're going to begin with Ellen Tarlow, and then I'll come back later. So I'm going to sign off now. Ellen, it's your turn. I'm just going to disappear here.
Thank you, Lauren. Well, Looking for Smile actually started on a day more than 50 years ago. A day from my early childhood. I was about 5 years old. It was really something had happened to me the day before, and I woke up the next day feeling very much like Bear feels on the day of Looking for Smile. That feeling very different than I was used to feeling, and my world looked very different than it seemed to always look. And I was worried in a way that I had never worried before, that somehow I would never get back to myself and feel the same. And anyway, so it was a day like Bear's, and it was much like Bear. I would say also at the end of the day, I shared my concern this time with my mother about what had happened, and Smile did return. But it had always stuck in my mind as an important day in which I kind of saw myself and my relationship to the world a little differently. And I had always wanted to write about it, but never found the way. Um, anyway, so a few years ago, I woke up one morning with a glimmer, and the glimmer was to write a story about a character who had lost their smile. And so I didn't know who the character was. I didn't know why they lost their smile. I think the one thing that I thought that I did know was that it wasn't going to be a bear, because at that point I was already working on a manuscript with a bear, but that manuscript, the character got demoted to a mole, and this manuscript got the bear. I'm not sure why I really felt it had to be a bear, but this gets to another part of my writing process. It's possible I had been looking at this sad guy in my office. Having characters around me is also another source of my inspiration as a writer, my early childhood being one, and characters being another. So I tend to maybe collect and gather possible characters for books, and maybe I can share a couple of them with you now. For example, we have this guy, the tiny horse, and I'm working on a story about him right now. And I'm in my office, which, as you can see, is an attic. And I think if I turn my computer this way, you can see some of the characters that are there waiting to be in stories. And in fact, I see one that is already in a story, and I will bring her out. And this is a little dachshund, and her name is, in the story, is Jelly Bean, and she has a friend named Shoe. Anyway, I had this idea of a character who had lost their smile, a bear, and so I started to write. Usually I start to write in a notebook much like this, often in bed. And this, I think, is the first draft of Looking for Smile. It says, one morning, Bear woke up and felt a little different than always. He went to the mirror and looked a little different than always. Someone who looked like Bear, but not quite like Bear, looked back. I tried to write the story about a bear who woke up and couldn't find his smile, but somehow I never felt like I was getting to the heart of it, to that way that I felt, that scared way that I felt when I was 5 years old. And so I put the story aside. Then, I guess a few months later, I woke up with another glimmer. And this glimmer was to make Smile a character. And I quickly wrote out the sentence, Bear and Smile were always together. And that day, I wrote most of the book, a book that had eluded me, that I had tried to write for many years, and somehow making Smile a character and making Bear and Smile great friends really was what helped me to write this story. I think an important benefit that came from making Smile a character, is that because the two are such great friends, when Smile leaves, you really feel Bear's aloneness. And I feel like that's just an important way that we feel when we're sad, is alone, and when Bear wakes up, he feels alone for the first time ever. And so I felt that kind of came through now in this version, with Smile being a character and Bear's friend. So anyway, I had written about 80% of this book, and then I just really felt like I needed to take stock and think, what did I want children to come away with this topic? What did I want them to learn or to share with them? And so I entered the character of Bird, who becomes a model of empathy in a way, asks Bear what's wrong, and just sits quietly with Bear, and the two appreciate the falling leaves, and Bird starts to sing, and then the two create music, and then Smile returns. And so I think what I wanted children to come away with through Bird in this episode is that it's really through these simple gifts that we all have access to, with the gift of, a friend, a close friend, the gift of being able to step back and appreciate something in our world like falling leaves, the gift of music or creating anything. All of these are things that we can turn to that can help us, change the way we feel. Anyway, that is a little bit about how I created the story Looking for Smile. As you know, words are only part of the story in a picture book, and a very important part is the pictures, and Lauren Stringer is here to share with you how she made these beautiful pictures. Thank you very much for coming. I really enjoyed talking to you, and take it away, Lauren.
Thanks, Ellen. Hi, it's great to be here. I'm Lauren Stringer, the illustrator of Looking for Smile, and I'm sitting in my studio right now where I illustrate books. And right behind me is the book I'm currently working on called The Dark Was Done. It's a manuscript that I wrote myself. Right over here, you'll see where I do all my painting at a big drafting table, all my art supplies. And over here, you can see on the wall a lot of writing on sheets of paper, which I'll tell you a little bit more about when I share the process of Looking for Smile, which I will be in a slideshow. But just to tell you how I began with Looking for Smile, the picture books that I illustrate are usually offered to me by my editor. If she's reading someone's manuscripts and thinks this would be so great for Lauren, she'd send it to me and I get to consider it. In this case, it was a completely different kind of story. I had been invited to be on the faculty at the Writing Barn for an intensive picture book workshop. And the other two members of the faculty were Alan Johnston, my editor at Beach Lane Books, and the agent Reuben Pfeffer. And we all met down there in Austin. There were, I think, about 25 participants, and each one had submitted a manuscript to be given feedback on. And meanwhile, the three of us shared our love of picture books with everyone and tried to inspire them to keep writing more and more picture books. And I think on the second night, it was pouring rain. Alan, Reuben, and I were standing under an umbrella waiting for an Uber to take us downtown for dinner. And Reuben said, Alan, I think I found a story that you might be interested in. So he handed her a manuscript. And in the rain under the umbrella, Alan began to read the manuscript. And as I listened, I fell in love. And when she was done reading it, I said, Alan, if you publish this book, I want to illustrate this book. And the book was Looking for Smile. And just like that, Ellen Tarlow, who had submitted this manuscript, got an agent, an editor, and an illustrator for a story, which is really unusual because usually you have to send in manuscripts to try and get an agent. It can take months. And then once you get the agent then sends your manuscripts out, but it can take months or even years to sell a story. And then once an editor takes your story, it can take even longer to find an illustrator who can or wants to illustrate it. So it was magic happening in that pouring rain in Austin, Texas. And I flew back home to Minneapolis, and I'm going to tell you right now in slides how that all happened. So I'm going to hit share screen. When I first read Ellen's story, it looked like this. There were no pictures. There was no pagination, which means it did not tell me which words went on which pages. As the illustrator, this is my job to determine not only the pictures, but the flow and the pace of the story as the pages are turned. When I got back to my studio in Minneapolis after being in Austin, Looking for Smile was the only thing I could think about. So I sat down and painted the sketch of Bear and Smile and sent it to Alan, who loved it. Then she sent it to Reuben, who loved it, and he sent it on to the author, Ellen, who loved it too. and the magic that happened that rainy night in Austin continued to grow. In fact, the very first sketch stayed so long in all of our imaginations that it ultimately became the cover of the book. This is one story that almost seemed to paint itself. I let the emotions of the story inspire the color, the shapes, and compositions. I have great respect for emotions and feelings. I have been bear, and I have been rabbit, and I have been bird. I felt them all in my body and wanted to express the story from the inside out. Whenever I begin illustrating a story, the first thing I do is write the story very large on sheets of paper and hang them on my studio wall. This way, I will never lose the story in a stack of papers and can always see it to refer to it. Next, I start a sketchbook dedicated to the story, and I staple the manuscript on the first page of the sketchbook so I never lose it, and I begin to collect images to inspire the characters. My sketchbook is where I draw my first impressions and develop my ideas. Sometimes I add color, sometimes it's just pencil on paper. Occasionally, a sketch in my sketchbook needs no changes and is just perfect to become a final illustration. I also do dozens and dozens of sketches on separate sheets of paper, trying to get to know my characters, how they move, how they sit, how they might swim, how they wake up in the morning. I also do dozens and dozens of color sketches too, finding the emotion and action in color. I love to look at the art by other artists, and here I was inspired by a self-portrait by the artist Paula Modersohn Becker, surrounded by irises, and decided my bear and Smile might also like to be surrounded by irises. And the image became spot art on the inside of the flap of the book, introducing the reader to a gentle bear and Smile who love irises. I also make a small dummy book. This is not the real book, and it's very small, about a quarter of the size of the real book. And this is so I can get a sense of the flow of images and words. And I can also easily share it with my editor, who can easily share it with Ruben and Ellen. When Ellen wrote the line, "Then one morning, Smile didn't come," I knew right away that we all have had those mornings, especially lately. During this pandemic, there are so many mornings when I wake up and Smile doesn't come. And on those days, for me, the world loses all of its color. And I knew that this is what had to happen to Bear too, a colorless world when Smile would not come. Many of the final illustrations had to be painted over and over. In this illustration, Ellen wrote, "Bear looked up, he looked down, he looked inside, he looked outside." I love this spread. When Bear looks inside, I thought about how a young child often looks inside by covering their eyes. So Bear covers his eyes with his paws. I love the spareness of the clouds and water in this illustration. But then I realized that Bear was in a river, which the reader had already seen him jump into, with a waterfall and trees and rocks and everything. So I had to repaint it. And here you can see the pine trees, the waterfall, and the clouds all around Bear, and you know exactly where he is. Sometimes I had to repaint an illustration in order to get the emotions just right. Here, I love the intimacy, but Bear was missing his left arm. The abstraction was lovely, but it didn't feel as if it fit with the rest of the book. So I painted it again, adding in the arm, but it really looked awkward. So I painted it again, but the intimacy and emotions were lost. Bear's head was too far away from Bird. So I painted it again, and finally, the fourth time through, I felt that everything was just right. While working on the illustrations, my studio wall begins to fill with finished and half-finished illustrations, and they begin to have conversations with one another and with me. They tell me what they need to become a whole picture book. When working on Looking for Smile, I set up a cardboard wall on the end of my drawing table so I could bring images that were next to one another in the book close in order to match colors and scenery. I also painted the end papers. The front end papers are inspired by the wallpaper in Bear's bedroom, as are the back end papers, But there's an added secret under the back flap of the book, a framed portrait of 4 friends: bear, smile, rabbit, and bird. For the savvy reader, you will also see this same portrait of the 4 friends above Bear's bed on his bedroom wall when the story starts. And finally, when all of the illustrations are finished, they gather in one place on my studio wall, and I go over them with a fine-tooth comb, looking for missing claws or trees or flowers or any sorts of details that need to be added or taken away. And then I pack them up and mail them to the publisher, where they turn them into a picture book, Looking for Smile. Thank you so much. It's been lovely talking with you.